Looking at the lush green expanse of vineyards can be such a magical sight. But today we're going to take a closer look at a vine plant to see what are the various parts and what role do they play in grape growing. I'm standing at the Garwar sub-region of Akluj in Sholapur. We're at the Fratelli Vineyards, and we're going to zoom into this vine plant to look at its various parts. What we can't see are the roots, which are deep within the soil, and they go as far deep as they can in search of nutrients and water that they can supply to the plant. The deeper they go, the better it is for the growth of the vine plant. Next up, what we have is the main wooden part of the plant. So typically the main trunk, the canes that sort of, are trained along this trellis. So the wooden part is basically something that stores carbohydrates and energy, particularly during the hibernating seasons of winter, where it sort of stocks up on all its reserves, which is then put to use during the growing season when the vine plant actually needs all that carbohydrate and the reserve in order for it to be able to grow and ripen the grapes to the optimum. Next, we have the leaves. Now, think of the leaves as the plant's engine. They are what is keeping the entire plant growth alive. And how do they do that? Through a process called photosynthesis. We might have studied about photosynthesis back in school, guys, but I'm now going to refresh your memory of what photosynthesis is. It is where the vine plant actually takes up carbon dioxide, sunlight and water in order for it to go through the act of photosynthesis and releases oxygen and creates glucose. This glucose is actually food for the vine plant, and it's very necessary for the grapes to be able to ripen. If there is not enough photosynthesis that takes place, the vine plant can have insufficient growth or can lead to poor quality grapes or could lead to unripened grapes, all of these which we don't want. So it's very important that there is enough canopy. As you can see here, this is a nice lush canopy, and at the same time, there's lots of leaves, but they must all be kept away from each other. So it should be a lovely open canopy, allowing lots of air circulation going within it, so that it as many leaves as possible are facing the sunlight for in order for it to be able to go through photosynthesis effectively and smoothly. And beautifully embedded and growing within the shades of these canopy leaves are these lovely clusters of grapes that are virtually ready to be harvested. Now, one great benefit of grapes growing within the shades is it kind of allows them to ripen at a steady pace, particularly where there's lots of warmth and sunlight. You don't want grapes that are sunburned or are damaged. So growing within the shades of this canopy is probably a good idea, particularly during the day when the harsh rays of the sun are quite intense upon the vineyard. And this grape cluster was in fact first the flower cluster. So in a vine plant, it is the flowers that convert after pollination into grape clusters. So flowering again is a very important activity that takes place in the life cycle of a vine plant. And when the flowers have both the male and the female organs, and when it sort of goes through pollination, the entire bunch of flowers then turns into a cluster of grapes. These grapes are not colored deep with color right from the beginning. When they just come out, they are green, hard, quite acidic, but it is only through the ripening season, the growing season, where they accumulate sugars and the colors change, particularly for the red grape varieties. They go from green to a red colored skin, and in case of white wines, they go from green to more translucent, sort of a light green or a whitish sort of a skin. And of course, they become bigger in size, they accumulate sugars, they develop flavors, and that's typically the act of a ripening of a grape until they get to a point where they are fully ripened and are ready to be picked. these are the main parts of the plant, but some of the side heroes, of course, are tendrils. Now, tendrils are really tiny, for example, like this one. As you know, the vine plant is actually a creeper plant. It needs support in order for it to be able to stand on its 2 feet. So tendrils are these little support systems that will curl up or catch on to any sort of support that it finds and help the vine plant grow upwards towards the sunlight, because all it's trying to do is stay alive and thrive and grow. So in search of sunlight, it'll sort of try and find whatever it can in order for it to grow upright towards the sunlight, and tendrils play a part in helping the vine plant do that. And one other thing that I wanted to draw your attention to are actually the buds. Now you can see the buds are these little tiny spuds that are growing within the angle of the leaf and the shoot, and these are actually what will form next year's growth. So these are very important because budding needs to take place in a very healthy way, and this is like a small DNA molecule which is storing all the reserves, all the DNA of this year's fruit, all the good things. Is kind of packing at a very molecular level, because this year's budding, or the quality of this year's budding, will in fact determine next year's quality of vintage. So buds actually play a very important role as well, because they take a very futuristic stance of how the vine plant will thrive in the following vintage. So here you go, guys. This is a beautiful vine plant, and it's such a beautiful science, all sort of packed into this one little vine plant, which produces wonderful grapes that then get turned into delicious wines into our glasses, which we all enjoy. And I'm right here to talk to you a little bit about the terroir of this wonderful place, which Fratelli really prizes in terms of making some high quality grapes. When you talk about terroir, firstly, what is terroir? Terroir is a French term actually derived from the word terra, which stands for earth or land, and typically talks about or refers to the concept or the notion of the fact that wine is nothing but an expression of a certain place. Every wine is unique because it grows in a particular combination of climate, soil, topography, and many other natural such factors that influence the style and the quality of the wine that comes from that place. So in effect, wine is nothing but geography in a bottle. I thought we'd talk a little bit about the terroir, the unique terroir of this place and this particular plot of land. As you can see, everywhere around me, there's vineyards which have been planted. But what makes this place really unique is firstly the climate. The climate is subtropical, but thankfully, because we are at an altitude of roughly 650 meters above sea level and there is a good flow of wind across, this in turn has a moderating effect on the climate, and it enables vines to be able to grow and thrive naturally. Not to mention, although during the day, the temperatures might be slightly higher at about, let's say, 27 to 28 degrees Celsius, but the night is significantly cooler and it sometimes drops to almost 20 degrees, 18 degrees Celsius during the natural growing season. If I look at the topography around me, what naturally strikes me is this sloping, this gentle sloping hill right here, which is wonderful actually for viticulture, because the slope allows water during the rains to be able to drain naturally. This is important because in viticulture, we don't want flooding, we don't want any kind of water logging, because that can then increase too much pressure in terms of fungal diseases or downy mildew and sort of create many complications. So what in fact vine plants need is just enough water, but just not too much water. So the gentle slopes are brilliant because they ensure that the water just kind of slopes down, the percolation is really effective, and the vine plants are able to receive just enough water, which is also supplemented further through the drip irrigation system that you can see here. These little wires right here sort of allow the drip irrigation. Now these are west facing slopes. The east is right here in front of me and behind me is the west. So these are west-facing slopes, which actually in a subtropical and a tropical climate are much desired because the morning harsh rays of the sun are not directly on the vine plants, and the vine plants experience the soft, warm rays of the setting sun rather than the harsh ones as the sun is rising. So this in fact is again a phenomena that allows for the grapes to ripen a bit more slower and be able to develop their flavors steadily and in a better way. Now if I look at the soil, I can see there's a lot of stony, pebbly sort of an element. It's very friable soil. So what that tells me instantly is that again it has good water drainage ability. This again is very important because best vine plants thrive in soil which has great water drainage, and they're relatively not very fertile. These soils, I am told, are also quite poor and not very fertile. This is important because we want to be able to stress the vine plant just a little bit, just to the right degree, where they're able to actually work a bit harder, produce grapes of better quality, and develop good concentration and flavor in the grapes. So this kind of a soil seems to be perfect, and all of these wonderful vine plants around me are planted with the Sangiovese grape. Sangiovese grape, as we all know, is the native grape variety of Tuscany, but somehow it has found this wonderful expression on this unique terroir of the Akluj region in Sholapur. Sangiovese as a grape variety is a late ripening variety, so it's actually pretty ideal for climates that are slightly on the hotter side. And how do I know this is Sangiovese also is if I look at this leaf of Sangiovese. The leaf is very distinctive. It's got these 5 intersections and these sort of 2-year lobes, and if I look at the edges, they're wonderfully defined pointy sort of edges, and that's just very signature of the Sangiovese sort of a leaf. And if I look at these clusters of Sangiovese right here, these are tight bunches of tiny, relatively tiny grapes, which have sort of, quite a compact bunch, but they look fully ripened and they look ready for harvest. So today is harvest day and we're gonna go and do a bit of harvest. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Share, subscribe to our channel, throw us some comments, tell us how you found this video, and show us some love. Thank you so much. See you again. Bye.